What is going on, everyone? Today we've got NFL Mock Draft 3.0. I've been wanting to get this one out for a while. I apologize I haven't been able to do it sooner. But with the NFL Draft this week, we're going to have content every day leading up to the draft. The What I Would Do mock draft I'm planning for probably tomorrow. The 7-rounder, the doozy, is going to be Wednesday. And then Thursday I always like to do the day of the draft. One round, what we're feeling the day of, what my gut is telling me as things and rumors start to wind down. We kind of get a better idea of what might be true, what might be smoke. In today's mock draft, though, it will be 3 rounds with trades. We're going to go over 100 picks today, so a lot to get through. I don't have all of my fancy graphics here, but I will for most of the final mock draft related episodes. So without further ado, let's not waste too much more time. Let's get this show on the road. So again, as I said earlier, this is a predictive mock draft, what I think will happen. I don't necessarily agree with all of these selections, but I do agree with the choice at number 1. It is a foregone conclusion at this point that the Tennessee Titans will be picking Cam Ward. I mean, it's kind of obvious based on, for one thing, the Fortnite streams last week from Cam Ward. Those clips were kind of funny. But there isn't a whole lot to be said here that hasn't already been said already. I think that Cam Ward is pretty comfortably head and shoulders the best quarterback prospect in the draft, and it seems like most NFL evaluators would agree with that. Number 2, the Browns. I've previously had them picking Shedeur Sanders. The more as time goes by, the more it seems like not only will he not be the pick at number 2 or number 3 to the Giants, but he's going to continue to slip. And I've overthought it with quarterbacks in the past. There's almost a small part of me that says, yeah, the Browns need a quarterback. Shedeur Sanders is here, and then probably a drop-off according to some people. But I don't think they will end up going that route. I think much of the rumors, much of what we're hearing is more true than not relating to Shedeur's draft stock. So between Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter, I would be really surprised if it's not Travis Hunter here, and I think it should be. Best football player in the draft. You can figure out what he's going to do in the NFL after you pick him. That's sort of the bridge you cross once you get to it. He's obviously an extraordinarily talented prospect, unlike anything we've really seen in the past, in the sense that he's going to at least try to play on both sides of the ball at the next level. And I'm not sure how it's entirely going to be executed, and I don't know if I can say that well-known player development organization, the Cleveland Browns, might be best suited to develop him. But he's certainly talented enough to play either wide receiver or corner, or both in some capacity. So I'm excited to see how they pull it off. And at this point, I would be really surprised that he's not a Cleveland Brown at this point. And this does feel like the correct pick for them. I think anything else here, even a trade, unless you're getting an absolute haul, would be a mistake. So the Giants at number 3, again, this could be Shedeur Sanders. They could potentially move back up into the first round. I think unlike the Browns, there's a 100% chance that the Giants are going to use an early pick on a quarterback at some point. Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll are playing with fire, Schoen in particular. If the Giants don't turn it around, one or both of those guys is out the door, and they know the best way to fix it quickly is hitting on the quarterback position. However, they don't have to do it at number 3. And with Travis Hunter gone, this leaves us with Abdul Carter. The Giants already have talent on the edge, but for a team like the Giants, who are as bad as they are, they can't be focusing on drafting for need. You got to pick the best player available, the guy who has a chance to become a defensive game wrecker. And I think more than anybody in this class, that player is Abdul Carter. Will Campbell going to New England at number 4. The Patriots are looking to protect Drake May, and I think given that he will be a top 5 pick here, they're going to try him at tackle, see if it works. Obviously, worst case, you can slide him inside to guard, but given the high investment, it seems like they would try him at tackle. Campbell and New England just kind of seems like where the rumors are all leading towards, and I am buying it personally. I don't know if I would use a top 5 pick on Will Campbell personally, but I get it. This team needs help on the offensive line. They've got to focus on making Drake May's life easier. So it's hard to argue against this logic, especially with only one quarterback in the top 3. and both Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter gone. Mason Graham to the Jags feels kind of boring because I've had this pick every mock draft. It feels like it's been very popular for the most part in the media, but it just makes sense. New general manager James Gladstone coming over from the Rams, a team who is not afraid to build up front in the middle of the defensive line. So it's fitting that his first pick is a guy in Mason Graham who you can plug in up front and try to make things easier for the guys around him while being productive and getting numbers in his own right. There have been some rumors about Ashton Jeanty in this spot. I could certainly see it. I don't think teams will be scared off of picking him in the top 5 because I think he is that caliber of player. And he's not going to go much later. He ends up at number 6 to the Raiders. I personally think this is the floor for him. I don't think he gets by number 6. And if he isn't the choice here to the Raiders, I think it's because he would go earlier than this. Either 4 to New England or 5 to Jacksonville. And the reason why I'm convinced he's going to go this high is because I think NFL teams, again, are changing how they view the running back position. Not necessarily the entire big picture and the entire landscape of the position overall, but more so the top line players at the running back position. I mean, we just saw Saquon Barkley be probably the most important cog in the offense of the Philadelphia Eagles, who went on to win the Super Bowl. So the answer is yes. An elite running back on the level of Saquon Barkley can entirely transform an offense and lead them to a championship. And I think teams in this range of the draft are going to view Ashton Jeanty in a similar light. That's the caliber of prospect we are looking at here. And I think looking at the Raiders situation in particular, they just traded for and extended Geno Smith. Pete Carroll is not getting any younger. I don't think this is a team who views themselves as rebuilding. I think they're trying to make the playoffs this year. They feel that they have a new window with the new contract for Geno Smith, who I think has some good years left. So, at face value, someone might say, oh, the Raiders are picking a running back. The Raiders stink. I disagree with that, and I don't think that's the philosophy they're using here. Oftentimes, with a new head coach and a new GM, you're kind of looking to build things through the ground up. But the Raiders, I think, are really going to be aggressive, looking to win right away. And if Jeanty is on the board, I do not see him getting past this spot. Armand Membou to the Jets at number 7. They have a hole at right tackle. Membou had a great year at Missouri. This is another very common fit of team and player. I don't think there's a whole lot to go over there. Jalen Walker at number 8 to Carolina. It seems like the consensus right now is that this will be the top 8. I feel like it's too chalky and something's going to mess it up. Ashton Jeanty at number 4 possibly, who knows? But I just kind of feel like this is what makes sense for these 8 teams to start the draft. The Panthers have been heavily linked to Jalen Walker for months. I think the idea of adding a versatile chess piece defensively, a guy who can play linebacker, who you can have rush the edge, a player who teams have been raving over his character, I think that's another thing that's going to lead to him going into the top 10. I think Carolina's going to pull the trigger. They haven't exactly hid that they like him. It could be a smokescreen. It would be a darn good one if it is, but I think all signs are pointing towards him being their guy. Number 9, New Orleans. This is the most pivotal pick in the entire draft. The New Orleans Saints hold the cards to what happens for the next 250 plus selections. So with the Derek Carr injury news and a lot of rumors suggesting that they might be looking to add a quarterback, this very well could be the Shedeur Sanders landing spot. I think there is some smoke to it. Remember, the Saints did draft Spencer Rattler in the 5th round. They played him a little bit last year. I don't think they're necessarily attached to him being the long-term guy. And if they like Shedeur Sanders enough, I think they're going to do it. The problem is, I'm not so sure that's the case. Now, I could see the Saints getting a little bit of tunnel vision here. Flashback to 2018. Remember when the Saints moved up to number 14? And the 2 guys who were rumored to be that pick were Lamar Jackson and Marcus Davenport. They ended up picking Davenport, who's a capable NFL player when he's on the field, which is pretty rare. But obviously they regret it. Lamar Jackson could have changed the fortunes of their franchise, and since they didn't pick him, they have been and probably will continue to be stuck at the bottom going forward. But I also kind of think that they recognize that none of the quarterbacks left in this draft are probably saving the Saints from where they're at. Maybe they get a guy on day 2 or early day 3. But why not try to play this smart? Play the long game. Hope you have an opportunity at somebody within the next 2 years. And instead, pick a guy like Shemar Stewart, who I think fits the exact prototype for what the Saints look like on the defensive line. Big, physical, plays the run, pass rushing upside. The Saints love guys with size and explosiveness up front. And personally, I believe in Shemar Stewart. I know there's a lot of people who are against him going in the top 10, but I think when you look at his profile, he's a terrific run defender. He led the team in pressures. Yeah, the sack numbers are not great, and he has to do a better job of finishing plays. He has to do a better job of being consistent, but the pass rush flashes are there, and we've seen multiple defensive linemen in this draft class play for Texas A&M in a separate school, and all of them were more productive at the other school. Walter Nolan with Ole Miss, Nick Scorton with Purdue, Fadil Diggs with Syracuse. All those guys played at Texas A&M, and all of them were less productive with the Aggies. It's not a scheme that is going to lead to the defensive linemen putting up big numbers. So that's much of the reason why I would still be in on Shemar Stewart being a really high first-round pick, and I would not have a problem with him at all here at number 9 going to New Orleans. I know Bears fans want Ashton Jeanty, and I really don't think it's going to happen. Now, I said the same thing about Rome Odunze last year, and I ended up being wrong. But I don't think I'm going to be wrong a second time. Tyler Warren feels like a guy who I think Ben Johnson would drool over, along with the fact that he's a naturally good tight end, and we have seen the value that Sam Laporta has brought into the Ben Johnson offense. Tyler Warren can do that, but he's also the Taysom Hill type in the sense that you can line him up anywhere, you can have him do anything, and with Ben Johnson's creativity in the playbook, you need guys in your skill position players who can wear different hats, can maybe throw the ball occasionally, can run the ball, can block, can catch it. Tyler Warren does all of that. I think he's going to make too much sense here for the Bears, and if he's on the board here at number 10, I think he would be their choice. Walter Nolan to the 49ers at 11. I'm very high on Walter Nolan. I'm considering making him my defensive tackle number 1 in this class. That's how much I believe in him. Former number 1 recruit who didn't get off to the best start at Texas A&M, but as I kind of mentioned with Shemar Stewart, that scheme is not meant for production. Transfers over to Ole Miss, where he was terrific. He's not the most polished, but I think the upside is there. We saw the flashes. We saw the improvement this year, and I trust San Francisco to really get the best out of him. Very good run defender, ascending pass rusher. I believe in the upside. I like the pick a lot. Ted McMillan of the Cowboys at number 12. His stock is kind of all over the place, but I have a hard time thinking he makes it out of the top half of the first round. I think he's a little bit too good, and I think the Cowboys are looking to make a big swing in this year's class. Jerry Jones has been sitting on his hands for multiple off seasons in a row at this point. They've got to add some juice to that offense. I imagine Jeanty would be their first choice, but again, unless they trade up, I don't think there's a shot they get him. And Marion Hampton could be in play. Matthew Golden could be in play. I've mocked corner here. Will Johnson, I do think could work. I think they're more likely to pick a corner early than most people would think. But I think Ted McMillan on one side. You've got CeeDee Lamb who can play the outside, who can play the slot. I think that'd be a really fun receiving duo. We saw how dangerous this team could be when CeeDee Lamb was in a partnership with Amari Cooper. It opens up the offense for CeeDee, who's one of the best 3 or 4 receivers in the league. And now you've got a big 6'5" jump ball target who moves really well at his size. Kelvin Banks to the Dolphins at 13. I've been a little hesitant to get the Dolphins offensive line because it's not a position group that they've really tried to invest in. But I also think at some point they've got to use a first-round pick on a tackle. I think Kelvin Banks has guard tackle flexibility. I'm a little bit higher on some of the other tackles in this range. I think some of them are going to be ranked a little bit higher than him. But sometimes you just got to open up the present and see that it's a pair of socks. Not going to get you excited, but it's going to get the job done. The Dolphins need guys up front who can get the job done, especially if Teron Armstead gone. Jahad Campbell at number 14 to the Colts. I imagine they would want Tyler Warren. I think Colston Loveland would certainly be in play. There is some buzz that he could go earlier than expected, maybe as high as number 10. to the Bears. But I think they're going to pick a different type of versatile player who doesn't necessarily have the high positional value, but Jihad Campbell is really good. And we have seen these athletic first-round linebackers not work out because many of them are just not consistent enough on a play-by-play basis. Many of them are either not great run defenders or not just naturally instinctive players in coverage. I think Jihad Campbell is going to be one of those guys who can break the trend. I think he can do a little bit of everything. He's rangy in coverage, but he's also smart. He's consistent. He avoids mistakes, and he's a good run defender. So if there is a linebacker worth picking in the first round, I think Jihad Campbell very well could be that guy. We finally have a trade here at number 15. The Falcons are going to move down to number 20. They'll be adding pick 85 and a 2026 fourth, while the Broncos get number 15 and a 2026 seventh for Marion Hampton. I think Hampton's going to go earlier than expected for many of the same reasons that we talked about with Ashton Jeanty. I don't think the NFL is going to overvalue running backs in the sense of the average starting running back. I don't think those guys are going to make more money than previously, but the high-end running back, the guy who can change the fortunes of your offense, and I think Denver may very well believe that to be the case for Marion Hampton. Size, physicality, athleticism, he provides it as a runner. And in the Sean Payton offense, if you can include a dynamic running back, that opens things up for everybody. Bo Nix loves to throw the ball short, loves to get his running backs involved. Hampton may not look like your prototypical pass-catching back, but he has 75 receptions over the last 2 years. And again, especially with a Sean Payton offense, to have a running back who can run routes, who can catch the ball short, that's very valuable. I imagine Denver really wants Hampton, but I think they know they're probably not going to be able to get him at number 20. They're going to have to move up to get the job done. And then Will Johnson, number 16 to the Cardinals. There's been some buzz about him falling a little bit in the first round, and I kind of believe it. Inconsistent a little bit in coverage this past year, especially in man. The injuries are obviously not ideal. The testing numbers are not ideal. And I think that could push him a little bit down the board. But he's been one of the best quarterbacks in the country since his corners since his freshman year at Michigan. The Cardinals have invested a lot in the secondary over the last couple of drafts, and I think they've done a fairly good job. I was fond of Max Melton as a prospect. Garrett Williams seems to be turning into a good pro. But I think when you have the chance to add a guy of Will Johnson's pedigree and long-term upside of the defense, it's going to be hard to say no to that. So I think he would be the choice here for them at number 16. The first half of the first round felt pretty predictable. Let's get a little crazy. Second half is going to have a lot more chaos. Maybe not so much at 17. Mykel Williams to the Bengals. They like these big, powerful edge rushers, and I think the value here would certainly be appropriate. He was a little bit spotty at times, especially earlier in the year, but I feel like he came along as the season continued. He is still a little bit raw. He's got some work to do, but the Bengals obviously need guys up front. It's no secret that defense was kind of a mess last year, and with the size, with the power profile that Mykel Williams presents, I have a hard time thinking he makes it out of the top 20. Gray Zabel to Seattle at number 18. They need offensive line in the worst way, whether it's guard, whether it's center, maybe a long-term tackle. Zabel can play it all. He's played all 5 offensive positions over the last 3 years. Very, very good player with North Dakota State. Obviously, the small school is going to lead to some questions. But then at the Senior Bowl against the big school NFL prospects, he was one of the best players on the field. Number 19, we've got another trade. Shedeur Sanders' slide comes to an end. I think if the team wants to move up for him, you got to do it before the Steelers at number 21 because that feels like a very reasonable spot he could go. The Rams at number 26 as well I'd be looking out for. So it is the Giants moving up, giving the Bucs 34, 65, and 105 for 19 and 157. And as I said earlier, I would be floored if the Giants do not use a high pick at some point on a quarterback. Brian Daboll and definitely Joe Schoen are trying to save their jobs. Russell Wilson's not doing that. Jameis Winston's not doing that. You know the type of player who has a chance to get the fans excited? A rookie quarterback who plays well. Now, it's still to be seen if Shedeur Sanders does play well, but you got to take that chance if you're either of those guys. And I think if there's anybody who is fit to play in the New York market, it's a guy who's been under the lights, under the scrutiny his entire life in Shedeur Sanders. And there's certainly some questions of his football character. He's never been coached at a high level away from his dad, but I think he also has an edge to him, and I think that could very well work to his favor. I think, especially with falling a little bit in the first round, he's going to have a chip on his shoulder. He's going to be looking to prove people wrong, and I would like this pairing of him with the Giants. I think Brian Daboll and obviously his development at the quarterback position in the past could be a good fit for Sanders, and I would hope that Daboll isn't fired by week 7, right as Shedeur Sanders is probably about to be thrusted into the lineup. Number 20, the Falcons get Mike Green. They move down a little bit. They get the guy I probably would have given them at number 15 anyway, so this really works out for them. Green, like Zabel, small school guy, maybe not as small with Marshall, but was dominant at the Senior Bowl. 6'4", 250, incredible production, 17 sacks as a redshirt sophomore for the Thundering Herd. Of course, there are the character questions with him, but if he passes the checks, I think he's going to make it past no further than this range in the first round. And the Falcons have got to use a high pick on an edge rusher at some point. They've used a lot of day 2 picks on guys up front, but they've got to bite the bullet and use a first rounder. This is year 5 for Terry Fontenot as the general manager. It's been skill position, and quarterback. They've got to invest a high pick on defense. That's their weakness. They've got the build on offense starting to really get going, but the defense needs a lot of help. Derek Harmon to the Steelers at number 21. I'm not convinced they're going to force themselves into an early quarterback pick. They did it a few years ago with Kenny Pickett, and it was a disaster. They kind of forced themselves into that, given, I think, partly the storyline of him playing at Pitt, along with the lack of quarterback talent behind him and just kind of forcing themselves into a need. I do think when it is all said and done, Aaron Rodgers will be under center in week 1 for the Steelers next year, but regardless if he is or isn't, I think they might look to add somebody at some point this year, but I don't think they're going to want to force it in the first round. If they do pick a quarterback at any point in this draft, I hope it's Jalen Milroe, ahead of Shedeur Sanders, ahead of the other guys. Now, if they don't pick him in the first round, I'm not sure if they're going to get him at all. But I would like to see Milroe drafted to a stable organization like the Steelers, who are not going to rush him in, who are going to be patient, who are going to take time to develop him as a passer. We're going to talk about Milroe and where his stock is in a little bit once he's off the board. But I've kind of had the idea of Milroe with the Steelers for a while. It's a shame that I'm probably never going to end up mocking it, but I am kind of hoping for Milroe's sake that it does happen, whether it's in the first round or probably more likely on day 2. Colston Loveland to the Chargers. I think this is the absolute floor for him. If he gets to this spot, he ain't making it out. Jim Harbaugh is going to run this sucker up to the podium, get his Michigan Wolverine back, gives Justin Herbert a new weapon on this offense. That's got to be the number 1 priority here for the Chargers. Add some explosiveness, add a dynamic weapon to the offensive side of the ball, because that's clearly what they're missing, and I think that certainly can be Colston Loveland. Jahdae Barron to Green Bay at number 23. It feels like kind of a weird fit because they just signed Nate Hobbs in free agency, who's primarily a nickel corner. I think Barron at the next level played most of his snaps outside, but probably will be best off in the nickel. He has played just about everywhere, though, on that Texas defense, and I think the Packers have shown that they like guys with inside-out flexibility. I mean, they just paid Nate Hobbs $12 million a year, and I don't think they'll be afraid to invest a high pick here in Barron. They still need more in the secondary. I thought about some edge rushers here. I think they would really like one of Shamar Stewart or Mykel Williams. Neither of them made it to this spot. Receivers obviously a big need as well, but I think Brian Gutekunst will pick a punter before he picks a wide receiver in the first round. So that kind of leaves me with Barron, who a lot of people think probably will end up going before this pick. I think more so around the 20s is probably where he ends up, as he will go to the Packers. Number 24, we've got a trade, but it's not a big one. The Texans are moving up 1 spot. The Vikings exchanging a 4th rounder for a 3rd. I've got to be a sicko having a team move up 1 spot, but it's true. Matthew Golden to the Texans. I think they've been patiently sitting on their hands for the last 6 or 7 picks, trying not to force the trade up, but have been waiting for the opportunity to go and get him. And somehow, some way, he has fallen to number 24. This feels like the floor for Golden as well. I don't think he gets by Houston at number 25, or in this case, 24. Obviously, Tank Dell's future is in question. Golden's a guy who can play the outside. He can play the slot. I think he'll be a really good complement for Nico Collins, and that would become one of the most fun receiver duos in the league. Offensive line, of course, is a big need for them. That's what's been publicized because it was so bad last year. But outside of Nico Collins, that wide receiver room does not have a whole lot to be excited about either. Number 25, the Vikings, who moved down one spot, get Malachi Starks, a ball-hawking safety who can play in the box. He can play deep. Cam Bynum was a huge piece of that defense. He just left to sign with the Colts. So Starks is your natural replacement. You hope at some point he will become better than Cameron Bynum. The Vikings have shown they're willing to go against positional value in the draft. They picked Lewis Cine in the first round, and while that did not end up working out, maybe this time around the Georgia safety will be a good pick for them. Trade at number 26, the Titans are going to be moving up 9 spots, giving away 103 and 141 to the Rams to get Emeka Egbuka. I have a hard time thinking he makes it out of the first round, and much like Golden, the Titans are waiting for the opportunity to pounce. Those two guys could very well go earlier than this, but that's just kind of how the board played out here. The receivers fall a little bit. The Titans capitalized, though. They need more guys in that receiving room. Watching the Cam Ward Fortnite stream, it was kind of sad to think that as of now, they're going to go into next year with Treylon Burks as their number 2. I don't know if Egbuka is ever going to become a superstar, but you're looking at someone who I think coaches are going to love. His character is being raved over. The production is already really high as is, and this is someone who's going to be a good player right away in the NFL. A pick that I'm really surprised I haven't seen mocked that often is Kenneth Grant to the Ravens. Gets him another body up front. Obviously, the Harbaugh-Michigan connection. I think this makes a lot of sense if Grant falls this far, which is a question in and of itself. But I feel like this is a home run fit, and I trust the Ravens to really get the most out of him. Tyler Booker to Detroit. The Lions love their Alabama guys. They love their Nick Saban guys. Another kid whose character has been spoken very highly of. I think it was Nick Saban himself who described Booker as the Will Anderson of the offense in terms of his smarts, in terms of his football intelligence. And I think that's something that the Lions are really going to like. Obviously, trying to get the right guys in here, the kneecap-biting type of players. Guard is a need for this team. They let go of Kevin Zeitler to the Titans. Graham Glasgow was not very good last year. Now, there are some young guys here to watch out for. Christian Mahogany played really well in the couple of games he started, including the playoff game against Washington. Gio Manu, I think, could get some run at some point. Developmental tackle who has still a ways to go. And I think the Lions do want to eventually have him as a tackle. But if they really like where he's at in his development, maybe they give him a shot at guard. Regardless, I think they need another starter. And I think in an ideal world, you go into next year with Booker and Mahogany as the 2 starters. And Glasgow can be your backup. He obviously can play center as well. Frank Ragnow is a little injury prone at this point. So I think having a really good backup in Glasgow who's versatile behind these young guys at guard would make a lot of sense for Detroit. Donovan Ezaraku to Washington at number 29. A little undersized, but really productive player. He had 14 sacks this year for Boston College. And I think Dan Quinn would be willing to take the shot on the smaller guy. I think Ezaraku fits the build of the type of edge rushers that Quinn has liked working with in the past. And I think this will be a solid pick here towards the end of the first round. I think in my last mock, I had the Bills getting Maxwell Harrison in the second round. I don't think he ends up falling anywhere near that far at this point. And I have him going to the Bills here in the first round. Little inconsistent at corner, but I think the Bills are going to look to get younger. They did extend Christian Benford. I have no clue how he was that cheap, but I think getting another guy who can play alongside him in Maxwell Harrison makes a lot of sense. Good ball skills. Little inconsistent, though, on a play-by-play coverage basis, but he's got the size. He's obviously got the athleticism and quickness, so I think this will be a very solid pick for them here at the end of the first round. Number 31, TreVeyon Henderson to the Chiefs. Yeah, offensive line's a big need for them, but you can get that in the second round. What you probably can't get is a guy in Henderson who gives their offense something that they're missing. A true home run hitter out of the backfield, because they just do not have that at this point in time. Someone who's a threat in the passing game, who's a major threat in space. It's going to make the opposing defense have to respect the run a little bit more, get more guys near the box. It opens up things for Mahomes as a passer. So the more I talk about this fit, the more I really think it makes a lot of sense. And then James Pierce, number 32 to the Eagles. I've had Pierce going out of the first round, and personally, I don't think James Pierce is going to go higher than people think. I think there are some questions in terms of his skill set and how he's going to fit to the next level. The character concerns exist as well. I think if he does go in the first round, I think the Eagles will be the spot. For one thing, I think they're the type of team who can brush the character concerns away, get him into a winning organization, a winning atmosphere with guys who are going to be able to nurture him and help out his development. And then obviously a team who has done well in terms of developing guys. They're going to need a new edge rusher with Josh Sweat gone. So again, if I think James Pierce goes at all in the first round, the Eagles feels like the type of team who I think would be willing to take the chance. They're not afraid of taking risks. It's no secret how they've won 2 Super Bowls in the last decade. You got to be a little bit ballsy sometimes, and, well, Howie Roseman has a big pair of cojones. Now on to day 2. I'm going to try to go through some of these picks quicker because, again, we have a lot to go through here. But we are going to go in depth with this first one. Jalen Milroe, the first quarterback off the board in the second round, the first player off the board in the round. He's QB3 in this draft, not Jackson Dart, not Tyler Shough. It's Jalen Milroe going to the Browns. So I'm in a really weird spot with these quarterbacks. Obviously, I'm interested to see which teams all these guys go to, but I'm more so interested to see where, at what point in the draft, because you could tell me Jalen Milroe goes at number 21 to the Steelers, I'd believe you. You could tell me he goes in the later part of the third round, I would believe you. On one hand, quarterback is the most valuable position in the league. Obviously, everyone knows that. And because of that, you want to make sure you have a good one. And the more valuable a position is, the higher up the draft board they're going to be pushed up. Cameron Ward, for instance, he's not the best prospect in this draft, but he's going number 1 because he's a quarterback and the Titans need one. However, on the other hand, if you're not a great quarterback prospect, that's going to push you way down the board because in order for a team to pick a quarterback, it's got to be a guy they love. It's not a position you can afford to miss on. If you miss on a quarterback, that sets your franchise back 3 to 5 years at least. And as the general manager and as the head coach, you're probably getting fired. So because of that, that's why so often on day 2 in the second round, you don't see a lot of quarterbacks. When's the last time we've had a quarterback go in the top 50 picks, but in the second round? Maybe Jalen Hurts, and obviously that ended up being a good pick. But there are other circumstances where that's not the case. Look at a guy like Kyle Trask going in the second round in 2021. And off the top of my head, I don't think we've had a quarterback go in round 2 since 2021, other than probably Will Levis, who was projected to go in the first round. But not as many teams loved him as we thought he did. That pushed him all the way to the second, where Tennessee kind of figured, he's still here, let's move up for him, let's see if it works out. And ultimately, it did not. Looking at Jalen Milroe in particular, of course, he has a lot to work on as a passer. I think he's farther behind Dart and certainly farther behind Tyler Shough in terms of his consistency throwing the ball. But for a team like the Browns, I think they're going to prioritize ceiling with this spot. And I think Jalen Milroe gives you an early floor because of what he provides as a runner. He's going to make this offense one of the better rushing attacks in the NFL just because he's so dynamic on the ground. And if he improves his ability as a passer, he's got the arm talent to do it. But if he could be more consistent under pressure, go through his progressions more consistently, accuracy is less spotty, all of those things can be taught. Other things, such as rocket arm strength, elite speed, elite explosiveness, that can't be taught. Jalen Milroe has that already. So some team's going to fall in love with him, especially if they really buy into his character, which I think teams will with Jalen Milroe. I think he's the type of kid who you trust and you want to lead your franchise. And as we kind of talked about with the Giants, I think at some point Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski's seats are going to get really hot. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion they use a high pick on a quarterback, but I think it's likely. And I think Jalen Milroe very well could go in this spot. I don't want to look too much into him being invited to the NFL draft because so was Malik Willis, and he fell to the middle of the third round. But that does show that teams like him. Teams like him enough to consider him at some point in the first round or maybe the early second. So that's where I'm at with Jalen Milroe. No clue where his stock is going to be or really any of the quarterbacks in this draft other than Cam Ward. But I think right now, early 2 feels kind of right. The Buccaneers traded back earlier. I've been picking Landon Jackson. good run defender, good size and length. I think if he was in a class that did not include Shamar Stewart and Micah Williams, more people would probably be talking about him, whether it's positive or negative. But with those tools, I think someone's going to pick him early, and I think it very well could be the Bucs. They love those bigger edge rushers with size and physicality. I think he brings that to the table. Rams at 35. I think they are going to really like Savon Revel. He's coming off the knee injury, of course, but I think they could use another guy in that secondary. They trade down a little bit knowing that there are other corners in that range. They can add to their day 2 arsenal because they don't have a second-round pick. They don't pick again until, I think, 90, and I think they're going to want to move back up for a quarterback at some point, but I don't think they want to force the pick here if they don't have to, especially with a guy like Revel still on the board. At number 36, we've got another trade. The Jags are going to move back 7 spots, acquiring pick 100 from the 49ers, who get Josh Conerly Jr. Some of the tackles slipped a little bit outside of the first round. Again, that's just kind of how the board played out. The Niners are going to take advantage of this opportunity, though. This will be a fantastic pick. Conerly has gotten better and better and better since he became the starter at the University of Oregon. And for their first 2 picks to be Walter Nolan and Josh Conerly, what a win that would be for San Francisco. This would be an A-plus start for them. Trey Amos to the Raiders at number 37. They need another corner really badly. In my last mock, I had them moving up for Luther Burden, who here is still on the board. Would not be a bad pick at all, but they just need corner desperately. And I think Trey Amos here would certainly be appropriate value. Luther Burden dips a little bit. It seems like he's going to fall out of the first round. I don't know how much I agree with it. New England here would be a great landing spot, though. They need to add some juice for Drake May. They signed Stephon Diggs, but they need a new fun wide receiver who they can really build their offense around. Someone who can play on the outside, who can play in the slot, much like Stephon Diggs. So I think will be a good mentor for Burden. I think this will be a really good fit for him, and the value seems really good. Josh Simmons to the Bears at number 39. Tackle doesn't necessarily seem like as big of a need as we would have thought 2 months ago for Chicago. But as we look at Darrisaw, he's coming off the ACL injury. I think he's probably going to be healthy for the start of the year. But if you look at the Bears, they can draft him and develop him and not try to rush him. Again, Ben Johnson knows how important the offensive line is. So to get a guy like Josh Simmons, who, if not for the injury, probably goes in the top 20, assuming he continued to play as well as he did this year for Ohio State, to get that talented of a player at number 39 feels like a really nice move for them. Quinshon Judkins to the Saints at number 40. Alvin Kamara is not getting any younger. He still has some gas left in the tank based on what we saw last year, but how much does he have left? I'm not really sure. They've got to prepare for life after him, and Judkins gets him a guy who has good size, 6 foot, 220, powerful, physical runner, can offer a little bit in the passing game as well. But I think his skill set differs enough from Kamara to where the two of them can complement each other, and eventually Judkins can become the guy. Nick Eamon-Wari to the Bears at number 41. I'm fascinated to see where he goes because obviously the size, the athleticism, the traits, those are really exciting, but his production and his role in the NFL, it feels kind of unclear. I don't know where exactly he's going to play. I don't know what exactly his role is going to be. I think Dennis Allen can make the most out of him, though. Allen obviously did not have a good tenure as the head coach of the Saints, but he's a really good defensive coordinator. So I would trust in him to get Eamon-Wari's fit and role in the NFL correct. Jaden Higgins to the Jets at number 42. I could see him going earlier than this. I could see him as a surprise first rounder. The Jets, I think, are going to look to add some more size at receiver, get a nice get a nice compliment, pardon me, for Garrett Wilson. And Higgins gives them something a little bit different to what Garrett Wilson provides, and I think the two of them would be a really fun long-term duo. Kevin Winston to the Jags at number 43. I think I had them picking Winston in my last mock. He was really good as a sophomore in 2023, and then he got injured. He had the partially torn ACL that had him miss all of the first 2 games of the year. And I feel like that pushed his stock down by like a full round. And yes, obviously the injury is not ideal, but assuming he's healthy for the start of camp, it's not like he put new bad film out there. It's not like he had a really bad junior season. It's that he didn't play. He was so good, though, as a sophomore. And given the athletic traits that he brings to the table, I think he's going to go earlier than people expect. I think he will go in the top 50, And the Jags got to move down. They got to add another top 100 pick while still getting him. So I think this would really work out well for them. Speaking of guys coming off of injuries, it is Benjamin Morrison. Medical question marks with him, but if he passes all of that, you're looking at a first-round caliber prospect. He was, like Will Johnson, a guy who really played well early in his career as a freshman and a sophomore. Missed time as a junior. Production was a little more spotty, but I still think he could go in the second round. And as I've mentioned in the past with Dallas, I think corner is a bigger need than people realize. I think Trayvon Diggs could be a cap casualty at some point, and DaRon Bland is on the last year of his deal, and I don't know how willing they're going to be to pay him. He just missed a large chunk of this year. They're paying Dak the big money. They're paying CD the big money. They're going to be paying Micah Parsons the big money. You're going to have to make some casualties. I think Bland could be one. And because of that, I could see them picking corner as early as the first round, really. But here in the second round, I think it makes a lot of sense. Ariante Ursary to the Texans. We've got an interdivision trade. The Colts are going to move down to number 58. They'll also be getting 79 in the third for 45 and 151. Ursary is another one of those guys who I think is going to go earlier than expected and could be a surprise first rounder. I look at the Chiefs at number 31. Great size, great length, great production over the last couple of years. Played a little bit worse this past season as a redshirt senior for the Gophers, but I don't think it's bad enough to push him out of the top 50. The Texans just traded away Laramie Tunsil. Their offensive line stinks. It stunk with Laramie Tunsil, but now it stinks even more. They've got to add another guy, and I think there's a big drop-off at the tackle position after Ursary. There are going to be a lot of tackles going within the next 10 or 15 picks, but most of those guys are tackle-guard hybrids who don't have the size, who don't have the build that Ursary does. So if the Texans want a player like him, they know they've got to do it now. Another trade at number 46. Green Bay moves up 8 spots. They give Atlanta a couple of day 3 picks. So the Falcons move down again. They've done a nice job of adding to their treasure chest of draft picks, while Green Bay moves up for Nick Scorton. I think they're going to like the positional flexibility and the size that he brings to the table. They like their bigger edges. Now, I don't think he's going to play as big as he did at A&M this year, 6'4", 285. I believe he weighed in at quite a bit less during the Combine, and he was productive as a smaller player at Purdue over his freshman and certainly his sophomore seasons. But I think the Packers are still going to like what he provides as a pass rusher, also what he can do in the run game. Gets him another body up front. It would be very on brand, I think, for Brian Gutekunst. Marcus Mbow to the Cardinals at number 47. Primarily has played right tackle for the Boilermakers, but also his experience at right guard. I think he would slide into one of those guard spots for them. They did draft Isaiah Adams in the third round last year, but I think adding another guy like Mbow would make quite a bit of sense here. As Isaiah Thomas to the Dolphins at number 48. It's kind of looking like Cam Smith in the second round was a bit of a whiff. Jalen Ramsey sounds like he's going to be on his way out. So Thomas ends up being the pick. 6'2", 200. Not maybe the most athletic you look for, but I like his size. I like his consistency overall. Whether it's in man, whether it's in zone, he can do a little bit of both. Very solid throughout the course of the year for Florida State. I think that'd be a nice pick for them. Donovan Jackson to the Bengals, another guy with tackle guard flexibility. Primarily has played left guard for Ohio State, but held up at left tackle after Josh Simmons got injured. I think the plan with him, though, will still be to play guard, especially given the Bengals' hole at one of those guard spots. Even though he's not a defensive player here, and that's the biggest need for them, defense, they also could use a couple more offensive linemen. You got to protect your quarterback. Tate Ratledge to the Seahawks. I don't know if I've seen anyone put him this high, but he's a good player. Really, really quality starter over the last 3 years. They got Gray Zabel in the first round, but Gray Zabel's not enough. This team needs more. They need a lot more. They had 2 really strong interior offensive linemen here in the top 50. Their line should be better than it was last year. 51, we've got a trade. The Rams are moving up, giving away 90, 101, and 127. A 3-for-1 swap for Denver, while the Rams are moving up for Jackson Dart. In my last mock, I had the Rams getting Dart at 26, and pretty much everyone has had Dart going in the first round. It seems like the hype train is starting to die down a little bit, at least of him going in the first round, and I personally am jumping off the train altogether. I don't think he's going to go in the first round. We see time and time again quarterbacks be projected way earlier than they do, because as I mentioned earlier with Jalen Milroe, if you don't absolutely love a quarterback, you're not going to use a high pick on him. It's too much of a risk. Last year was an exception. We had 6 guys go in the top 12. But Jackson Dart, even Shedeur Sanders and Jalen Milroe, those guys are not on the level of prospects as any of those top 12 picks were. So because of that, I think teams are going to go back to not necessarily forcing the issue. And a guy like Jackson Dart, who everybody has penciled in as a lock for the back end of the first round. You know why it's the back end of the first round? Because he's not good enough to go in the front. If he was a legitimately really good quarterback prospect, he would not be getting mocked in the 20s. He would be going in the top 10. Maybe a team really does love him. Maybe New Orleans at 9 is all about him. They say, F it, let's do it. Shocker like Michael Penix was a year ago. But I don't see that being the case. And if teams don't truly love him, that's going to push him down the board a little bit. However, I think the Rams, of all teams, will be willing to move up these 3 picks to get him. 90, 101, and 127. That's a lot to move up here to 51. That's giving up much of the remainder of their draft. But as I've talked about in the past, I've connected the dots with them. I think they will be picking a quarterback early enough in this year's draft. They were ready to trade Matthew Stafford to the Giants. They eventually got the financial compensation worked out. But that kind of shows me that they felt comfortable moving on and starting fresh. And that sort of tells me that chances are there's a guy in this draft that they like. This plan would not necessarily work if Justin Fields in free agency was the apple to their eye. Obviously, you're not going to sign him after paying Stafford. But assuming it's not Fields, I think chances are McVay and company like one of the guys in this draft, and I think that really could be Jackson Dart. And as unlike I thought a couple weeks ago, I don't think you have to stick and pick him at 26. I think you can get him in the second round. It's a little bit more of a gamble, but I think the media has overhyped his draft stock, and people are going to be surprised that he goes later than expected. Alek Eyomador to Seattle at number 52. Big-bodied receiver. I've mentioned I like this fit a lot because he gives them what they don't have at receiver, and he can block. And this team needs guys who can block. Carson Schweisinger to the Bucs at 53. I think they really want Jihad Campbell or maybe Jalen Walker at number 19. Walker, I'd be shocked if he made it there. Campbell, maybe. In this scenario, neither of them do. That's why they moved back. Schweisinger at 53, though, feels really solid, though. I really like what he provides as a cover player. As I kind of mentioned with Jihad Campbell, you see so many of these raw, freakishly athletic linebackers who just do not know what to do once they're in an NFL defense. Again, I don't think that'll be the case with Schweisinger. And the Buccaneers, a team who has valued the linebacker position, I think it makes sense. Noel Williams to the Falcons. This might seem a little bit early, but I like what he provides. Good cover player, really good tackler, tough, physical, strong, 6'1", 200. I think he's going to go earlier than people expect. Jack Bech to the Chargers. I think Jim Harbaugh is going to really like the character that this kid provides to the table. I think he's going to like the size, 6'2", 215. They need another big-bodied guy. I still think Quentin Johnston can be an okay NFL player, but you can't rely on that at this point in time. So I think adding Loveland in the first round, getting Bech here in the second round, they need more than just Ladd McConkey. He put the offense on his back in the playoff game against the Texans, and my God, was he good. I think Ladd McConkey has a chance to be a top 10 receiver or close to as soon as next year. But he's not enough. They need more, and they've gotten more. JT Tuimoloau to the Bills at number 56. They did just sign Joey Bosa, but you're not planning on him being a long-term thing because of age and certainly because of injuries. JTT's a big guy, 6'5", 270, good run defender, really improved as a pass rusher, finished with 15 sacks this year. I think he can be a good number 3 behind Bosa and Rousseau and eventually carve out a longer-term role. Jalen Noel at 57 at Carolina. I think they found a hidden gem with Jalen Coker last year, but I don't think he stops you from making this pick. Noel's a guy who has slot experience. He's played a little bit on the outside as well. Noel, Coker, and Xavier Legette is an intriguing 3. I don't know who out of that group is the guy per se for Bryce Young, but you've got 3 interesting developmental prospects who all have unique skill sets and I think can complement each other somewhat. And I think the value here would be more than appropriate. Jonah Savaitanaya to the Colts at 58. Productive 3-year starter who's played 3 different spots. Right guard as a freshman, right tackle last year. as a sophomore in 2023, and then both right and left tackle in 2024 as a junior. The Colts just lost Will Fries. I think the idea is that he probably would play guard next year. Could be a long-term starter at tackle. Andrew Mukuba to the Ravens. I think he's going to go earlier than expected. He's a good player. The Ravens are going to look to add, I think, your more true, traditional center field safety. I like our Darius Washington. He's a cool player. I don't think he's stopping you from making this pick. I think Mukuba really played well for Texas down the stretch last year. His stock really went up, in my opinion. Was productive but inconsistent in the past at Clemson. I think he really refined his skill set at Texas and has earned an opportunity to go in the second round. Oluwafemi Oladejo to the Lions at number 60. He's a little bit raw, only 1 year as a true edge rusher. But I think Dan Campbell and the new defensive coordinator, Kelvin Shepard, are going to like the idea of developing him into a longer-term player. The flashes from him were impressive last year. There's some work that needs to be done. I don't know what his role would be as a rookie, but I think they're going to like the long-term potential. Caleb Johnson to the Commanders at 61 gets him a true, at least, early down back with some pass-catching ability. Brian Robinson was not great last year. Austin Eckler was good for his role. He was better than I expected, but he's still getting older. I think they're going to look to add a true early down runner to pair with Jaden Daniels, try to take some attention off of him. It helps enhance Daniels' ability as a runner, and it's going to open up the passing game as well. Cameron Williams to the Bills at number 62. Not a lot of people have been mocking them at tackle, but I think adding a guy like Williams, who doesn't necessarily have to play right away, but has long-term upside, could make sense. I think it was last offseason they were close to cutting Deion Dawkins. They were able to make it work. They were able to keep him. And obviously Dawkins is a good player. But at some point, he might either be a casualty or he might just be older for them. So I think grooming Williams behind him as a long-term starter would be a good move for them. Charles Grant to the Chiefs at number 63. Small school guy, William and Mary. But obviously he's dominated his level of competition. The Chiefs' offensive line really struggled last year. I don't know if you can necessarily expect him to go from the FCS to the Kansas City Chiefs and play well early. Maybe you don't rush him quite like they did with Kingsley Suamataia last year. That seemed to hurt him quite a bit. So I think developing Grant behind the scenes and eventually looking for him to be a long-term starter could work. And then Mason Taylor to the Eagles. I think they really want to add another pass catcher. They've really tried with the third receiver spot. They traded for Jahan Dotson last year. It hasn't really worked out. And then with Dallas Goedert, he's a good player, but he hasn't consistently been able to stay on the field. Not getting younger. Going to need a new contract soon, and the Eagles obviously can't pay everyone. So I think they're going to pick a tight end in the top 100 picks, and I think it could be Mason Taylor, a talented young player who I think is going to continue to improve in the NFL. He's gotten better and better every year at LSU. I like that pick a lot for them. Into the third round now, Darian Porter to the Bucs. Tall, physical, athletic corner. They took a shot on Zion McCollum a few years ago who had some similar traits, and it really worked out. McCollum's due for an extension. Maybe they still pay him anyway. But they're also replenishing the well a little bit with Porter, who they hope can kind of have a similar trajectory. Darius Alexander definitely could go earlier than this. Probably will, but again, this is kind of how the board played out. I think this is a high floor player, though, who will be able to contribute right away for the Chiefs, unlike Charles Grant. They could use another body, I think, on the defensive line. Good run defender. The sack numbers won't really show it, but I like what he provides as a pass rusher. And I think at 66, that'd be solid value. Cam Skattebo to the Browns at 67. Look, they lost Nick Chubb, and Skattebo's not Nick Chubb, but he can replicate the role to an extent that Chubb provided on this offense as your physical downhill runner. The Browns are really going for all the big names. It's like they're playing EA College Football 25 with Travis Hunter, Jalen Milroe, and Cam Skattebo as their first three picks. Kyle Williams to the Raiders. They need another pass catcher. They couldn't pick one in the first two rounds. Now they add Williams. 6 foot, 190, a little bit undersized, but he is explosive. Really played well this year for the Cougs. I like that pick quite a bit. Number 69. Nice. Omar Norman-Lott to the Patriots. Has never been a full-time starter at Tennessee, but teams are going to like the athleticism. They're going to like the flashes that he brought when he was in the game for Tennessee. Gets him another body up front. Torrey Horton to the Jags. Kind of similar to their second-round pick, Kevin Winston. Horton went into the year as a day 2 guy, only played 5 games this year. He played well, but he missed much of the year with an injury, and his stock went down. But assuming he's healthy, there's no reasons really for him to go down to begin with. 6'3", 185, good size, good character. I think that's going to be a big thing for a team like Jacksonville, the new GM, new head coach. I'd like that pick a lot for them. New Orleans at 71. This is an interesting one because they've said they want to pick a quarterback. I think it's definitely possible. I would be okay with them picking Tyler Shuck here. I'd be okay with them picking Kyle McCord here. But I'm going to call their bluff a little bit. And with Tyleik Williams still available, another guy who probably ends up earlier than this, but this is how the board played out. I think they'd be happy with this pick here. Gets another body up front. They did draft Shamar Stewart at number 9, but that's not enough. They need more guys on the defensive line. This would be good value. The Bears finally get their running back. I know Ben Johnson has been patiently waiting to replace his boy DeAndre Swift. Certainly thought about it in the second round, but they'll settle for R.J. Harvey here in the third round. 5'9", 210, physical runner, big play threat as well. Really good season last year for the Knights, and I think he can wear different hats. You can use him downhill. You can use him in space a little bit. I think Ben Johnson's going to like that. Jordan Burch to the Jets. Talented edge rusher with really good size. I thought he played really well when he was healthy this year for Oregon. A former 5-star recruit who took a little while to put it together, but I really feel like he did this past year. I think he should go earlier than this. Maybe that's my Duck bias, but when he was injured and didn't play last year, you could really notice, and I think this will be a good pick for the Jets. Xavier Watts to the Panthers at number 74. Very, very good player at Notre Dame. I think he could slip a little bit. The athletic traits are obviously not great, but very productive player. The Panthers feel like they're getting a really rock-solid football player here in the middle of the third round. Dylan Sampson to the Niners at number 75. They just lost Jordan Mason to Minnesota. I really like that pickup for the Vikings. He played well last year. And obviously, given Christian McCaffrey's health uncertainties, running back is a question mark for them. Isaac Guerendo, I thought, showed some good things last year. I think Dylan Sampson can complement Guerendo quite nicely. I think he's a little bit raw. He's one of the youngest players in the draft, and you don't have to rush him in there because you have McCaffrey healthy for now, but I think with Sampson maybe taking over the long-term McCaffrey role, that could make a lot of sense for them. Princely Umanmielen to the Cowboys. His fall comes to a close. The Cowboys have shown they're not afraid of guys with character questions. I think he fits their billing in terms of what they like in terms of size and explosiveness, 6'4", 255. Braden Swinson to New England, high floor player, kind of opposite of what they did with Omar Norman Lott earlier in the third round. They did sign Harold Landry, but I think Mike Vrabel's going to want as many solid players in that pass rush as possible. TJ Sanders to the Cardinals at number 18, big physical defensive tackle being added to Jonathan Gannon's defense. They went offense in the last round. Front seven's a need for them, and they haven't picked front seven yet. I feel like they had to do it at some point. Back-to-back picks for the Colts. They're going to pick 2 of the most productive players in this draft, starting with Harold Fannin Jr. I think he's going to give them the unique weapon that Shane Steichen has been looking for. And then Kyle Kennard at number 80. Had a great year last year, 10 sacks, 7 as a junior, 6'5", around 250 pounds. The Colts obviously picked Laiatu Latu in the first round last year, but I think they could use to add more to their front unit. Demetrius Knight to the Bengals at number 81, one of the older players in the draft, but a guy who I think is going to be ready to go right away. It's kind of unclear if Jermaine Pratt is going to be on the team next year. He did request a trade. Hasn't happened yet. I think regardless, so they could use another linebacker and a guy who can play in place of him being traded. So I think that'd be a solid pick. Josiah Stewart to Seattle, a little bit undersized, but really tough player. 6'1", 245. So obviously that's a little bit of a question, but started his career off really well at Coastal Carolina. Has developed very nicely in Michigan. I think this would be a solid pick for Seattle. Tyler Shuck, finally off the board. He could go in the early second round. He could go on day 3 because I thought he showed some really good things at Louisville this past year. The guy can absolutely swing the ball, but he's 25 and has a history of injuries. I think that's going to scare some teams off. You got to be in love with a quarterback prospect to pick them. And you might be in love with the film, but then you see the age. I think the injury concerns are probably a bigger issue than the age. I think a team who really likes him could look past the fact that he's 25. I think it's going to be harder to look past the history of injuries. And it's not even like Hendon Hooker a couple years ago. I think Shough is better as a prospect than Hendon Hooker. I would be more willing to pick him early than I would have with Hooker. But at least with Hendon Hooker, it was just really the one injury. Shough has a history of it. There's a reason why he's been in college for 7 years. I do think it's worth it for the Steelers, and whichever quarterback goes to the Steelers, assuming they pick one at some point, I will be excited for them because that's, again, a stable situation who I think is going to be willing to be patient with them. They're going to learn from their mistake with Kenny Pickett. And I think him developing behind, again, probably Aaron Rodgers would make sense, especially at this point of the draft. He's not a third-round caliber player. If Jalen Milroe and Jackson Dart are going to go in the second round, I think he's good enough to go in the second round as well. So I think this will be a very solid pick for the Steelers. Barron Sorrell, the Jets moving up here, giving away 110 and 145 to the Bucs. Gets them another guy who they know can play. Isn't necessarily going to be a superstar. 6'4", 260. I think Aaron Glenn is going to like that size. To play in Detroit, you've got to be big. You've got to be able to stop the run. And now with Aaron Glenn moving over to the Jets, I think he's going to look for those types of players. They have a good edge rush room with Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald. But Johnson's going to be on the last year of his deal. He's coming off the Achilles tear. And I think they're going to look to add some bulk in terms of their edge rushers. And that's what Sorrell can do. Ty Felton to Atlanta. They got this pick from Denver. They were hoping Rondale Moore would be their explosive, smaller receiver. Didn't really work out. Darnell Mooney, of course, was terrific. But they could use a third guy behind him and Drake London. 6'2", 186, dynamic with the ball in his hands, over 1,100 yards last year. I think having someone like him as a real threat after the catch would enhance their offense. Ashton Gillety to the Chargers, gets him another body up front, 6'3", 275, great size, solid production. Only 5 sacks this past year, lower than his last couple of years, but the overall pass rush ability is still there. He just didn't finish as many plays as he did a year ago. Trey Harris finally off the board of the Packers. This will be really good value. Was fantastic at Ole Miss last year, over 1,000 yards in just 8 games. He has the size, he has the build that I think the Packers look for at the wide receiver position. So I think that would really work out for what they're looking to add. Devin Neal to the Jaguars, really high floor player, 5'11", 215. I think he's going to give them physicality, toughness, and consistency in the backfield. Maybe not necessarily a home run hitter, but a guy you can trust to be consistent with the ball, and a guy who can provide value as a receiver in the passing game. After him, we've got Miles Frazier to the 49ers. Of course, they went offensive line early, trading up for Joshua Connerly, but they're going to need a guard, I think, as well. Frazier's a guy whose name I think is finally starting to creep up people's boards. I think he could go in the top 100. Jared Wilson to Denver, one of the better pure centers in this class, and because of that, I could see him going earlier, just based on the scarcity at the position. Works out, though, for the Broncos who get him at 90. Anthony Belton to the Ravens at 91. I think when you have a guy like him who has the size and build you look for at the tackle position and the production that he provided last season, it's hard to not pick him in the top 100. The Ravens don't necessarily need tackle right now. Ronnie Stanley, I think, might have some years left, hopefully, for their sake. Roger Rosengarten looked pretty good. But at some point, you've got to prepare for life after Stanley, a guy who has a lengthy history of injuries. So I think Belton in this spot would be a good pick. Za Frazier to Seattle. A few years ago, the Seahawks picked a raw, toolsy corner out of UTSA. It was Tariq Woolen. The pick worked out. They're going to go back to it with Za Frazier. Woolen's on the last year of his deal. I don't think they're sold on giving him a second contract. So why not do something that worked out for them in the past? Corner's a bigger need for them than people think. Obviously, Devin Witherspoon and Woolen is a nice duo, but Woolen's a free agent after this year, and I think they'll be a little bit more hesitant than people think to extend him. Jalen Royals to New Orleans at 93. I've had them picking a receiver earlier than this. In my last mock, I had them get Matthew Golden. Chris Olave is good, but his future with the concussions is in question. I think regardless if he's healthy or not, adding another weapon makes a lot of sense. Royals, small school guy, but a really good player. Nearly 1,000 yards in each of the last 2 years. Ozzie Trapillo to the Browns at number 94. Gets him another tackle in the building. 6'8", around 310 pounds. Primarily has played right tackle over the last 2 years, but experience at left tackle as well. I think the Chiefs are going to pick a tight end at some point. I thought they would last year. They didn't. Travis Kelce's getting older. I had expected him to retire over the last 2 seasons now. It hasn't happened, but he's on the doorstep. And we saw regression from his play this past season. They've got to be preparing for life after him. And I think Elijah Arroyo has some of the similarities to Kelce as a prospect. So I think having Kelce develop him and mentor him would make a lot of sense. Wyatt Milam to the Eagles at 96. They're going to pick a tackle early at some point, maybe this year, maybe in the future, because they've got to prepare for life after Lane Johnson. I don't necessarily think they have to do it right now. And luckily for them, Milam has the ability to play guard. He can play center. The Eagles just lost Mekhi Becton, and Cam Jurgens is on the last year of his deal. You can't pay everyone. So to get a guy who can play multiple different positions, try to figure out where he fits best, and eventually plug him in at some point. The Vikings did just get Jordan Mason. I do like that pickup, but I don't know if he stops you from picking a guy like Jaden Blue here. I think is really underrated. I think he'd be a bigger name if he got the ball more. He's been very solid for Texas when he's gotten touches. 5.4 yards a carry last year, 6.1 the year before, and a great receiving option. Nearly 60 receptions this past season, and a guy who's super explosive, a guy who can get by the second level and be a home run hitter, but can also make guys miss short. I think he's being really overlooked as a prospect right now. I think he's going to be a great pro, and the value is going to be too much for Minnesota to pass on. Joshua Farmer to the Dolphins at 98 gets him another guy up front. Inconsistent as a run defender, but I think you like the ceiling that he brings to the table. After him, Alfred Collins to the Giants, kind of the opposite. Really high floor player, really good run defender. You need more space eaters alongside Dexter Lawrence, who's a defensive player of the year type of guy as is, but when you give him solid starters next to him, he can put up even bigger numbers, I think. Shamar Turner to the Jags at 100, a little bit raw, but another high recruit who played at Texas A&M, so the numbers weren't necessarily up to snuff for him, but a good player who pairs with Mason Graham. They drafted Mason Smith in the second round last year, got some young talent in the middle of that defensive line. Jared Ivey to the Broncos, his fall finally ends. Denver likes these bigger edge rushers. Look at Zach Allen, who was really effective last year. John Franklin Myers. Now you got a guy like Jared Ivey, 6'6", 285. I think he fits their billing quite a bit. And then last but not least, my beloved Detroit Lions. So like Jonas Sanker out of Virginia, a guy with versatility to play deep, can play in the box. He has been linked to the Lions, and yes, they have the best safety duo in the NFL right now. But to add another guy who can play all over the defense, or just have him have a set spot and use Brian Branch as your versatile chess piece. I think giving the Lions more guys with that positional flexibility would really entice Kelvin Shepherd, and so I think this pick could make quite a bit of sense. That'll wrap up the video. I know it was a long one. My voice is about to explode, but I hope you guys enjoyed nonetheless. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you are new. As I said, draft content all week, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Peace out.